Man talk. And I hope that you guys out there will make sense out of it, because some of the things that me and him have spoken about in the past. It's at the point where you be realizing, and then the whole time saying, you know what, I never knew this. I never knew this. And then it's you always have somebody who's grown, and who you always reach out to, to ask for the way forward, and for them to make you understand. Uh, you know, and it's always encouraging for them to say, when they say something positive about you, and it's everything nice. But before I say anything further, let him welcome him. Let him introduce himself. Mhm. Hello. Mhm,
Uh, Good afternoon to everybody. My name is Ralph McGurney.
mhm,
As has already been said, I
mhm,
am mainly in the field of education, but I dabble in politics as well.
mhm,
I have a great uh, sort of passion
mhm,
about the growing generations. I've got a great passion as well about, in the senses of growing communities
mhm.
and identities, particularly for immigrant communities that come in, and the choice for them is whether to assimilate or to actually hold their identity. Maybe let me just leave it there. That is who I am.
Yeah. You touched on something that is really something that needs to, I was thinking to myself that, sometimes, being from wherever you're from as an immigrant, you are sort of caught up by a situation where you are sort of, it's ideal that you sort of integrate into what's already here, because I mean, what you Romans, you do what the Romans do, and sometimes people are affected by that, because they don't know who to speak to, or they don't know where to go for assistance. So in the end, they trail behind. You see. So with what you've just said, it's ideal that people uh, have I are sort of directed to the right places.
Thank you. I take it. Thank you very much. I take that to be something, a statement as well as a question.
Mm-hmm.
Without taking too much time, I suppose you can actually direct me as to where your interests are. But let me just actually I think what you're angling at is how people adapt to the situations that they find themselves. Now, I am of the generation that have seen communities, people that have come from elsewhere, and seen them improve themselves to being not only relevant in the country where they've settled, but worldwide. Now, even if you look at the biblical thing, now you had the Jews or the Israelis going to Egypt, but then maintaining their identity. And they were able not only to influence what was in there, but to influence way beyond. Now, and when if you take the turn of the last century, the Jews or the people from Israel were actually equated to the blacks. And because of what they did, they actually sort of formed a cohesive force and completely overtook. They didn't anymore want to be associated with the blacks because of what they did within the community that they'd settled, keeping their identity and actually coalescing something. Not only did they actually became a force to reckon with, but you can see where the Jews are now. Now, when I came to this country, you had the Asians and the blacks were actually almost on par. Gradually, what the Asians, I'm talking about the Indians, the Pakistanis, and all that ilk, were again actually referred to as blacks. Now, and then afterwards, now you look at where the Asians are as compared to where the blacks are. What is this telling us? It is telling us that some communities coming here is not racist for people to keep their identity, to keep somewhere they're anchored, to keep something that gives them a stature, and to continue in that, giving confidence to their offspring, and thereafter empower those people. Now, you look at the Tory party at the moment, and you look at the influence that the Asian people exert, and you say to yourself, what is it? What is it that the Asians, that the Jews, that the other communities that came to settle here, what is it that they did differently than other communities that have been left behind? And I think that is what I want young people to be exercised with. That if you haven't got a cultural identity, you are missing roots that enable you to be anchored and to be strong, and not only actually affect your own futures, but to actually ripple out. Now, the Jews, if you look at what they've done, not only in Britain, you look at the influence that the Jews exert now, what they call the Jewish diaspora. They exert in America, they run America. And that is what young people should be sort of focused on. There is no magic wand. There is nothing that actually has said these people are people that are chosen people, and that's why they've got to actually affect the world that they're doing. It is the practices. Now, fortunate for those people, they've got something that unify them, that keep them together. And that which keeps them together also gives them strength. Now, unfortunately, I think that the host and myself have got the same background. And the unfortunate thing, you find that people that come from Zimbabwe, the last thing that a Zimbabwean wants to be seen doing is associating with another Zimbabwean. And that is a weakness that will keep those people as an underclass for a long, long time. Let me not take all the time, but that is my opening salvo on this particular issue.
Yeah. Having said that, what I've noticed with youth, what happens is when they come here, they sort of engage into what is supposedly the British culture. And then when they get caught up and are able to gain the accent, and they're able to do what the British do and everything nice, it gets to a point where they're at least 18, 20, 21 when they finish university. And then when they start to look for jobs, it so happens that they lean towards what is available. And with my experience, I found myself doing healthcare at one point. And then what happens is you go there and you meet our fellow people coming from wherever they're coming from. And then the conversation, first of all, goes on to say, what's your name? And then your name is Andrew. Okay, fair enough. It's English. Your surname, my surname is Mtunzi. And then it's like, okay, now that we've established that you are not, of course, we saw that you are black. So pretty much, and now that we've established that you are probably from an African country, what's your background? And then when that comes up, you start to try to fiddle and try to disguise yourself as, say, maybe I'm from the Southern Africa. And then it's like, which part of Southern Africa? Then eventually you are naked, because now we now know that you're in Ndebele and you're from Zimbabwe. And then so having come out, it's now like, so what do the Ndebele people do? You don't know. So it goes on and on until a point where you discover, you know what, I need to know my identity. And it becomes something that you need to connect with, in as much as we are all global citizens. But there's a thing that I think that you need to understand what your people do and how do they carry themselves, and hold that at most high. Because it's okay to try to fit in, but when you try to fit in and lose yourself, then it becomes a problem.
Indeed, host. I think that you said that you do as what others, and then you try to mimic what the host community does. This is what is called assimilation.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, an immigrant community, if they came here and absolutely imbibed the English culture so that they are properly English, if they could afford that, that would make some sense. Now, if
Yeah.
you look at the disempowerment mainly of the poor blacks, and it's because they assimilate to a culture that is non-culture. Now, the only way, look at the Indians who have quoted, you see how far they've gone. It's not that they failed to assimilate, that they've actually failed to adapt to the environment that they find themselves in. But what they've done is that they have anchored, they have found their roots, that in the assimilation, they've got the fallback position. Identity is extremely important. As an educationist, what I found, I used to teach in schools, and you'd find that the black kids, because of they are not actually having that respect of who they are, they always associated with the lowest common denominator in any of the society. They got nowhere because it is the thing that actually they thought was English culture is not really English culture. And the trouble is actually trying to say, I'm going to assimilate into a culture that is not entirely your own, is that you actually pick up almost the wrong ends of that culture. You cannot actually sort of really be what you are not. And one of the things that is particularly good about this country, particularly, is that it enables, it allows. A lot of people don't even know this. There are actually sort of on offer quite a lot of grants, a lot of money that is poured in a way to try to encourage people to actually be anchored in their own values as a way of best contributing to the community that has. Now, we have formed something called Bambanani here, which is toddling along, but not as well. Because when I came from Greenwich, you found that people of Asian schools really sort of linked into what was called language schools. There's a lot of money that the council put in there. And people would give those children the confidence that so that when they go and associate with what is there, they knew there was the roots is the anchor of where they are. You don't find them losing their way. You don't find them actually sort of falling into bad habits, into drugs and things like that, being drawn into the lowest common denominator. You got to remember also that, in fact, if you look at this, the English culture itself is also steeped in sort of certain cultures. You know, if you look at the Welsh, they are very proud. They've got that which is them. You look at the Scots, there is something that is Scottish that they can associate with, and it gives them the self-value, which then enables them to then play a better part within the society that they belong. They did not actually sort of go on and on. There is a sort of a misconception in a lot of people's heads. Actually, being racially aware, being aware of who I am. And if we go back to the African concept, it doesn't make you a tribalist. It makes you a tribal aware. If you actually are sort of aware of your race and its richness and whatever it has contributed to the civilization of the world is not racist. A racist, a tribalist is one that takes that and uses an advantage to suppress other people. You cannot be a tribalist or a racist simply by being proud of what you are. Now, if you look at, and you mentioned something to do with the Ndebele Southern, a lot of our children would, I'm talking about my generation, let alone your generation, my generation, our children would run a mile if you try to actually sort of want to enrich them with our culture. That is the poverty. That is what has actually led to us, wherever we are in the diaspora, and has got influences also on our countries. They are downtrodden because we are not proud of what we are.
Okay. Yeah. what you've said has really touched a lot of areas. So my next thing that I want to understand, according to you, home is where you are, or home is home?
This has got resonances for when we came here a long time ago.
Yeah.
There were people that could not understand that home is where is number whatever where I live. They always thought that they were actually in transition. They were going back to where they originated from. They failed to develop their homes where they lived. And you find, and I'm not actually denigrating in any way people that live in council accommodation. It is something that, some people have got to resort to. These people failed to actually improve their own locality where they lived, because in their mind it was just a temporary residence. It actually if you actually go back to where we come from Bulawayo and things like that, you found people that lived in towns, would not develop, would not improve themselves, improve where they are, because home was where they originated. Very, very poor mentality. Now the issue is this: where you are at that particular, you don't know how long you're going to be in this world. Develop it to the maximum. That is home at that particular time. The fact that you've got an outpost where you actually originated from, that you actually continue to develop as well, is not negative, but develop where you are to the maximum as a way of actually rippling and giving advantage to where you came from.
Yeah, because I was reading something where if you look at the imperialist, say for instance, Rhodesia in itself, because that's the common ground between me and you. I think it was I read somewhere where it said Rhodesia had electricity before London, and so then taking that into consideration, it's Cecil John Rhodes went into Zimbabwe and called it Rhodesia and made things happen, and I suppose it was a bit not fair to call the country in his name, yet he found people already living there and he had already called it. But he sort of, at one point, the pound and the British were 1:1. So the idea comes into mind that when you go wherever you're going, make it work. Don't live with the mindset that at some point I'm going to leave. Because I find a lot of our people, across Africa, it's there's everybody showing a picture of, this is my double-story house, this is my 2 cars parked outside, and this is what. But when you visit them while they're here, you get disappointed. It's sad. It's really sad.
I take I don't know, exception to you actually saying why that it was wrong for Rhodes to actually call the country Rhodesia. The thing is that if you create a vacuum, any rubbish can go into there. The people have absolutely failed to actually develop that concept of now. For you youngsters, people don't actually sort of scroll back enough. The reason, the ability of the European nations to actually dominate Africa was when they went in there, they didn't actually sort of go with the mentality that we are only here temporarily. They said we are. The Boers or the Dutch arrived there and said, this is now home. They developed it. The fact that there were advantages that accrued to where they came from at the same time. You talk about Rhodes. Rhodes actually was born here. God, I know where Rhodes was born. But the issue is that where is he buried now? Where he actually sort of developed himself. He's developed, and he actually is what is called home. The negative impact of people saying, I am not going to live today, I'm preparing to live tomorrow, is terrible. Because when you don't live today, you're working towards actually a life that you might not even have. The issue is this: if you develop yourself to the maximum, Where you are, you will still impact more positively the places that you come from. I have actually alluded to the Jews. You look at the influence that they wield in America. You look at what they have got, the stake that they've got in America. Look at how much that has accrued to making Israel actually as powerful as it is. It is the ripples of their having developed where they are to the maximum, calling America their home. They have had that beneficial effect of actually building an even stronger home base that they came from. This is a preaching to say, first of all, to go to the first point that I had, that the Black people have got to actually sort of know that strength comes from being together. That coming together and actually developing as a togetherness has got a lot of benefits, and also goes to where you are at that particular, develop it to the maximum, exploit whatever, if I can exploit in the positive sense, exploit your environment to the best you can, and there will be benefits for the places where you originate. The diaspora, if anybody has got to sort of do a historical study, the diaspora is the one that has shaped the world to what it is today. And young people need to actually sort of be aware of that.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Because the people that left Britain in search of whatever they was going in search of brought it back home. So it only makes sense that the diaspora everywhere, as young kids, also develop that mindset to say, in as much as I am where I am and I've built a home, I need to remember where home is so that I can develop it there as well. You see? And so I suppose, there is need for messages like this to be aired to people. And there's need then to lean towards leadership as well. I mean, if one can lead us to the promised land that we are both talking about, we could be far off. So what's your opinion about leadership across all boards?
Well, that's another. It depends. Obviously, leadership. And you will remember, I'm sure, when Obama said that what Africa needs is more strong institutions and not powerful leaders. Now, that might be, people might contest that. But to be honest with you, the world has transformed. There was a time that when we talked about leadership, we're talking mainly about autocracy, about somebody that actually sort of got things done. And there is still an admiration for having that charismatic, you look at what Trump, the mess that he's actually sort of having in America because of, sort of being an sort of towering leader. Now, yes, maybe your question, maybe you understand leadership, when it is actually sort of talked about as maybe not an individual, if you have got a sort of a visionary leadership, obviously everything has got to almost actually sort of go back to the style of leadership, the resoluteness of the leadership that you have. Now, a good leadership, if let's say Africa were to develop those leaders, not individuals, not sort of unicorns, not these people that are all powerful, but if we developed a good leadership, if let's say you look at the African unity, for instance, you look at our regional leaders, if we got people in that had the correct mix of leadership, Africa would transform. You look at what we've got. You look at Zimbabwe, for instance. Zimbabwe is one of the few countries that could actually stand alone on its own depending on everything. You look at agriculture, you look at mining, you look at all this, it almost has got it all. But because of poor leadership, look at the parlous state that Zimbabwe is in. Now, I always quote this in one of my interviews, maybe some of you might have come across, was there was this the guy that was Professor Bone, who was actually the chair in education when I did my first teaching course, actually sort of addressed the graduates on graduation day. And what he said about the Africans meaning blacks and whites, stuck with me all these years. And what he said was that there are people that believe that our African graduates are not clever. And he said, I have worked with Africans, and I dispute that. Our African graduates are very clever, but their white counterparts are wiser. Now, when you have a wise leadership, it can transform a situation. We've got, is it Hichileme of Zambia now? By him, not him alone, with the team that leads with him, in a very short period of time, less than a year, he has been transformational for the status of his country. Of course, leadership is absolutely important, and it is really getting the right mix of leadership. Of course, when you talk about leadership styles, you could have an autocratic leadership, you could have a democratic leadership, you could have a laissez-faire. And then the autocratic tends to be people that would actually have, they are leading, they are almost like dictators, they get things done. The democratic, even though it allows more people to have an input into the leadership that you have, can be, it's good because you got more opinions, but it can take times to have a transformation. And of course, the laissez-faire is just, for other people, is just really chaos. But you're quite right that, in fact, actually sort of for you as young people, if you are lucky enough, if you're in that epoch of having young people like you, Andre, who actually sort of would take and coalesce around yourselves a leadership that is visionary, a leadership that is transformative, to transform not only where you are, this home that you are in at the moment, but who could actually have, like what the old Jews did, to actually have that vision to improve not only where they are, but to improve where they originated from as well.
Yeah. That's quite informative. What do you think about the whole Brexit situation?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, the thing is that now that is actually sort of trying to actually sort of flash me to make my colors from where I am with my background. I think that, to be honest with you, warned about the problems that Brexit had. Unfortunately, the world is tending towards global. The problem that we have, and we've had it all through, is actually sort of having enough, giving wherever you are, empowering people to make their own decisions, against when you become a big umbrella that people feel that they are being actually lost in this maelstrom of different cultures. The British themselves, the British always thought that, like the Jews, they thought that they were chosen by God, and they didn't feel comfortable where they actually were being sort of made to be equal to people that they actually regarded as inferiors. So Brexit actually rode on that sort of ultra-nationalism. But as it has been, the way it has actually developed, personally, I feel that it has brought more problems than actually given any solutions. The feeling of identity, the feeling of that we are the British, we can actually sort of take our own decisions, has got to be matched against the disadvantages that have come from actually now not playing a role in the bigger sort of the bigger picture, the bigger world. And of course, that's my opinion. Some people feel that maybe actually sort of the people that actually sort of really will fight tooth and nail. A relative of mine, we actually have got sort of endless discussions about the globalism, the globalization of the world. And he feels that that is the worst thing that has actually occurred. Whereas I feel that the world actually sort of coming and sort of finding those common areas where everybody can cooperate, that it is a strength. But of course, there is the price to pay that when you are under the umbrella, like what you're in the European Union, you actually sort of, your voice could be muffled under, the many voices. And those that actually sort of advocate the Brexit, they're saying that it is sort of sluggish. The decision making has got to be referred to the central. We are no longer actually sort of doing what our own population requires, but we're being dictated to by Brussels, by whatever, the old British jingoism coming in, that the Germans actually couldn't conquer us in Second World War. They are trying to actually sort of conquer us through the back door. It's a pity. It can be argued whichever way. I don't know how the young people actually themselves feel, but personally, I would have been in my own area, which has got to do with a lot of research. We really felt that there was so much strength in actually sort of numbers. There was much more strength. There was much more resources that we could get actually sort of working with so many other nations which are contributing to improving the world than actually trying to isolate ourselves. But yeah, that is as far as I can actually talk about Brexit. Yeah.
Because talking about Brexit, as you were saying, it highlighted a few things which I then connected with some of the things that are happening, because coming from where you're coming from, where we are coming from, it's there's a built sense of community of go to your neighbor, get some salt, go to the other neighbor, get, you know what I mean, that sort of lifestyle. So when we come here, you are sort of because a lot of times family is spaced out, so you find that you may have an uncle who's in Manchester, an uncle who's in London, Birmingham, that sort of setup. So you then also learn that the people of English people sort of promote the idea of individualism. Not quite, but somehow that way, because then you sort of are trying to put yourself together where you are and make it work without the of course, you can reach out to one of the uncles that in Manchester for maybe say £100 or so, but ideally you are sort of cornered into being an individual rather. So there is that aspect of things. And then there's the family, right? And family, you have siblings. And many times it works out on the basis that you're all together, staying in one house. But then you find that there's that one brother that wants to have his girlfriend come over and have his, that's whole set up. So he decides to leave the homestead and go set up his own situation outside. Yeah. So having said all this, what is your teachings on the institution of marriage and family?
Okay. Yeah, we jumped from one fire to another. Well,
I hope you're safe.
The institution of marriage, I think that that's another area that really is very, very subjective. It also has got to do with what your sort of going back to our cultural roots are. Now, obviously, marriage as a certificate is something that is a certificated issue, is something that was alien to us. Marriage was in Zimbabwean way was actually sort of a building of a religion that actually brought sort of otherwise disparate families and brought them together. And in fact, actually, the issue of lobola, which actually has been corrupted the way it is in Zimbabwe, was actually to try to bring two families and build a relationship therefrom. And partly, apart from the genetics of it, of actually sort of internal breeding, is that internal breeding was actually sort of frowned upon because really you already were sort of actually sort of making a link with somebody who already is under the family umbrella. Now, from a viewpoint of marriage actually giving a kind of ceiling, a kind of we are in a relationship where we can actually sort of develop, where we can bring our children and with certain values that we have together. We look at marriage as a way of bringing families together was absolutely great. Now, and I have been divorced myself, and that is one of the things that actually sort of hurt me most because I come from the southern part of Zimbabwe, in the deepest part of Matabeleland, where a man that whose marriage broke down was sort of looked upon as somebody as a weakling. Now, we have come to the marriage where you got certification and now it's almost a legal document. I don't know whether that really actually fits in well in my mind. Marriage is actually having that sort of giving a sort of a strength, a backbone to where people could be. Remember that in our own relationships, the old relationships, when you married, you really married, yes, you married your husband, but you married into a big, big family. The lady or whoever it is that is coming into that big family and actually sort of became part of the big family and drew together, brought in some of the things, enriching the family that they have been. Now, when you talk about marriage now, as it is we looked upon, and I don't want to be controversial here, it's now taken on so many resonances now where you actually got people arguing about sort of same-sex marriages and things like that. That is something that we've got to transform. I'm quite liberal in my own views, but I will say that it is still a hurdle that I've got to actually sort of surpass. Because if you look at the biblical sort of side of things, marriage really was actually sort of one of the things that actually gave the background for the procreation of children. I would say from a biblical viewpoint, because that's what my biblical beliefs are. And therefore, and then giving them a background so that they actually felt secure in a loving relationship. Yes, of course, same-sex people might say, yes, we'll adopt a child, and then that child will have the same security. But this is something that we of the older school actually have got to transform into. I'm quite tolerant. The only thing that I wouldn't do it myself, and I don't know if any of my children went into that, I don't know how I would feel. But I'll say, let each to their own, whatever they choose. But from a viewpoint of marriage, giving something as part of the microcosm of a community is built by small units. And this sort of, if I can say that, you start with the small unit of a sort of a married couple who actually then transform or sort of extend to the families that they're in, and then building a sort of a bigger community. I think it's positive that way.
Yeah. Another thing along these lines, I want to ask, what do you think? Because what's happening now with our generation is the idea that you are marrying into a family is not quite embraced as you older generation people did. So what happens is, I am marrying you. I'm not marrying the whole entire clan, you see, because a lot of times what's happening is everyone is in a position where I can come and play the son-in-law for those 2 hours, and then I can go home to myself and my wife. I can go, and then 2 hours, and I'm back to my house. So I think what is happening now is the idea is now cherry picking from the West. So it's happening a lot. And what would you think works? And is it something that you would say, okay, fine, if this is what you're doing, go ahead? Or would you be in a position to say, guys, remember who you are? Mhm.
Well, you actually spoke about the marriage as something like you are forming that unit. Now, there, as far as where we started and maybe where we might actually end up going as well, that is the poverty of it all. Because what we actually sort of had a long time ago, marriages were able to subsist. People were able to actually sort of gain a lot of advices to where, possibly, I don't know the English equivalent, where people say, "Ulayo." When you actually sort of go and you're marrying somebody, you went to your aunties, you went to your uncles and things like that. They had actually walked the path. They knew exactly the people they were going to meet. And therefore, you know what I mean? You would gain by their experience because you respected it. Now, what we've got now is young people then coming. This is my girl that I met 3 days ago. I'm getting married because we're terribly in love and nobody has an input into it. When then these people sort of meet the challenges, as inevitably marriages would be, they've got no sort of place to fall back on because it is you two are married to each other and therefore you have actually sort of fractured the community. You have actually sort of you turned your back on the values that we actually sort of with our marriage system, the old marriage system. And therefore, and in any case, when you actually give them the advice for sustainability, if one were to look at how communities, how marriages actually sort of went through thick and thin a long time ago in our cultures, in ourselves, and you look at what happens now. Now, even if you look at the West and the East being Indians, Chinese, and all that, there is a saying that in the West, you you marry the one you love. In the East, you love the one you marry. So when you marry somebody, once you are there, once you've been supported to there, then you knew you actually sort of had there was what you followed when you actually had difficulties. You had the society to actually sort of to fall back on. Now, the one that you depicted, you're marrying your wife, you go and you shut yourselves. When the problems start to actually, you really haven't got, because remember, life in marriage is walking into a dark alley. You don't know what actually sort of is ahead of you, but there are people that have actually traversed that road. And that is why the richness of a marriage system supported by the community, supported by your society, had strength. And therefore you found that the marriages of the past, really the fact of actually people actually sort of breaking about divorcing was very, very rare indeed. Now, when we came here a long time to talk about in the last century, and we came here the 80s and things like that, the number of marriages that broke down, I would say that perhaps now, because of the assimilation into the culture and people thinking that freedom does not entail doing anything you want anytime you want, maybe things have bedded down a bit. But a long time ago, when people came here and actually just were swept by the storm and will do whatever, this is freedom, even to hurt other people, a lot of marriages broke down because they had no support structure that we had when we grew up ourselves.
Okay, yes. Some wise words, some good information there. Yeah, I was while you were saying something came up in my head, and then you mentioned about because I think I was in a wedding one time, and then the pastor said, this is the only situation where you get the certificate at the beginning, and you go on and find your way, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I
yeah, and you go on and find your way. So I think the idea of the community was a support system that was ideal in terms of you go to the community and say, we have in situations like this. I'm sure you guys have had a situation like this. How did you go about it? And then they sort of guide you and guide you to a point where you are back into uh, in a better space. Now, the challenges that they become are that certain things are condoned by different people. You see, so you find that when you go say, my husband has been unfaithful, and then they tell you, no, just be patient. As long as he comes home, and as long as he, he comes home and gives you is supportive and all that, men will always be men. Don't worry, just so, so it becomes a challenge for this new generation to reach out to people who they think will advise them in a way that they feel a difference between their way of life now and in the past. So you find that uh, you say, the whole tradition of lobola, and then you go to them and say, no, me, I need a wedding where the whole ring, and go church and go what. But what then happens is that advisor tells you to be, do you know what, you should be happy with that, although him coming to tell us that he wants to marry you, and the whole idea of the kettle, I think you should be happy, you should appreciate that. What would you think along those lines?
I will actually do a Bob, and I hope my friend is not listening to that, because this is something that is funny. But anyway, what I find about the new generation is this: in this melting pot, where people actually sort of think that money is the only thing that has got power. What young people actually, when they come to advice, they are coming for you to actually sort of to consolidate what they've already made a decision on. If a young person comes and actually asks me for my advice, and I give them what I think should be the best situation, is a way to solve a problem, and then that if that is not what they wanted, they'll go to find somebody who's going to give them the advice that they want. You know what I mean? It's just like,
Yeah.
just to confirm what they've already decided. And with the sort of absence, remember that, in fact, actually, sort of people, it's not about actually just thick-headed, things will get better. People will actually sort of try to give you impartial. When we talked about the old way of doing things, they'll be impartial. They'll be your sounding board, so that you are not in an echo chamber where you're hearing only what you actually want to hear. Now, they would look, it would be somebody who's actually looking at things, your situation objectively. And therefore saying, look, you know what I mean? Maybe you overlooked that you also overstepped in this particular. That's not what young people want to hear. When they come to you now, they want you to actually say, oh, you're right. You kick her out. She's no good. You know what I mean? And the bit that I want to say, and I'm sure you'll find it funny, is when we had young people, there was a couple, very, 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 very close to me, a family, and there was this pair going from one uncle to another, And then we're telling them about, marriage is something like this. You go to work at it. When you work at it together, when you actually sort of see it as a partnership, so that there's no person who's actually sort of knows it all. And this guy at the end just said, said to this young man, he said, "Ampana, lapho sidathelelwe udubo. Umfazi udubo ongazawubona ubona." I don't think that is the advice that you would actually. I hope that my friend is not listening. Now, the issue is this: is that it is, it is about values. It is about when you're looking at a marriage situation. It is like anything else. We learn what is rich about our culture. We learn about actually sort of what people would actually sort of coalesce advice that is going to actually put these young people onto a better level. But young people are not looking for that anymore. And they're throwing away what we spoke about, what we held sort of dear. Even if you come to me now and say, I'm having problems with my partner and things like that, as I said at the beginning, without repeating myself too much, most of the times you're not looking for me to tell you that which is going, even if it is painful facts to you, you are looking for me to actually sort of tell you that which you have already decided on. You want to then say, Umkuni actually told me this, because when in fact it is a decision that you made for yourself. That unfortunately is the danger again of not having an anchor, of not having deep roots. You go to the Asians, you go to the Jews, you go to the people that I've cited before, and you find that their marriages are much, much more solid. You do not get the people actually sort of having the problems. Of course, some of the things that the Asians actually do, the Indians particularly, I've got a lot of good Indian friends, I think are beyond what we would accept. I really do not actually think that our own women would actually sort of, if I had a wife, my wife would sort of agree to, she's earning her money and whatever it is, she wouldn't accept that I go and actually sort of go and buy him the underpants because I'm the man that is. But to them, it actually works. And
it works,
therefore, something that works is better than something that might look on the face of it to be better, but which in the end only sort of brings about tears.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is the cherry picking business is a lot of people are picking what works for. They're admiring something from the outside, and outside their culture, for say, and then they're bringing it home, and then in the mix of things, when it becomes difficult to sort of manage that situation, it becomes a problem for the whole situation. Because I thought the idea of us just having this, like the white people do, or like the Indians people do, would be something that's really nice. But then you realize that as your own, it's a bit of a challenge, and then everything gets messed up. But anyway, it's come to the end of the show, people. It's been a lovely conversation with my man Ralph, and I had a good time with him, and I hope you are able to watch the show back, and everything nice. And just before I leave, I'll just get him on to just before the end of the show. Welcome back. I think he had a connection problem. And I'd like to thank you for coming out and sharing with us your wisdom. And I hope those that had ears can hear. Any last words?
No, I think that I'm not going to actually prolong it. I see that we are already 2:00 when your program should end. And I do thank you very much. I think that it's initiatives like this, you do not know the power of actually communication in actually shaping lives for people. And I think that now that you got this opportunity, I really hope and pray that it actually is something that you can extend and actually engage more people. My own personal sort of way with this opportunity that you actually have and you're extending to us would have been that it would have been maybe richer if it is actually sort of a panel of 2-3 people that actually are actually sort of exchanging ideas like that and bringing even possibly sort of different points of view. But thank you very much for the opportunity. And of course, if they are, I'll probably be monitoring what you are actually looking at. The subjects that you brought in, those were the ones that you chose yourself, are not necessarily the subjects that I'd like to talk to. But if I've got something that I think is, which I think I should actually engage the young people with, I will certainly sort of pass it your way. Yeah.
Hey, anytime, you're always welcome back to have this to have a conversation same time. For whatever, just it's anybody out there who wants to reach out to, who's got something to say to the community, to they can always reach out and we have a conversation. It could be from your own subjects. It's not necessary. It's not always up to me. It's about what you want to talk about and the intentions that you want to tell the world what you think they do not know.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Andrew. And thank you very much for the opportunity. And I hope that young people could actually have had time to also ask questions and challenge ideas that we all people have. It's always sort of a cross-pollination of ideas. And also, of course, them saying, look, don't actually talk to us about those archaic things. They went with the ark. You know what I mean? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, man. All the best.
Okay. Take care.
Goodbye. Goodbye.